Forward to computer. Okay, I think the recording has started and we'll begin. I guess first off, can everyone please introduce themselves?
Okay. Yes, ladies first.
Okay,
sure.
So my name is Marie Corman and I'm a volunteer. I work as a volunteer for Agora Brussels. I retired a couple of months ago, and before that I worked on different things, including civic engagement, trying to promote civic engagement across Europe. That's it from my side.
Okay. I go further?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay, so my name is Michael Damman. I am a member of the Parliament team. So I'm an assistant. I work part-time for Agora. I work till September 2020. And I first helped to design the end of the first assembly and the crossing online because of the pandemic. And then I built with another person and many volunteers the second assembly that was a reactive one. Maybe we'll talk about it later on. And now I'm responsible for the quality of the information inside of the assemblies and also let's call the democracy networking. So trying to create connection with other associations that are interested in the renewal of democracy. And I've got other little roles, but it's not to be too long.
My name is Pepijn, and within Agora, my main role is the one of the Member of Parliament, which means that it is my job to defend whatever the Citizens' Assembly that we organize, which Michael just talked about, whatever they decide. I get to represent in Parliament. So that goes through these kind of citizens' resolutions that we make, for example, which is on, this one is on employment, the other one's on a bunch of texts they analyzed, and there's one on housing. And so my main role is defending what the Assembly wants in these in terms of these topics, and also to further the idea of deliberative democracy within the political institutions.
So I guess big overall question, what is Agora? Why, when and why was it formed?
Right. Should I take this one?
Yeah.
Sure.
So Agora was formed in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
Basically because well, where to start? Because the analysis of the Brussels and the Belgian, to a larger extent, political system was by a few people like, hey, this is not going well, we need to do something else. And then being inspired by, among other things, the little book by David van Weerbroek, which is called Against Elections. The idea of, well, how about a randomly selected citizens' assembly to sort of complement, at least, if not replace the existing parliament. That was the idea that was born out of a bar discussion, I'd say. And that developed into going to all these different political parties just prior to the May 2019 elections. Well, much prior to, I'd say, end of 2018, with the idea of, hey guys, do you want this? We want this. We want a citizens' assembly. We don't think people in Brussels are heard enough. We don't think they are actually making up policy enough. We think it's unfair that we get to vote once every 5 years, and then you guys get to decide everything. And so we asked them, do you want to include this sort of permanent citizens assembly with actual decisive power in your program. And they were not too happy about that. The political parties were not too happy about letting their own power go. I mean, to different extents. There were mostly in the Green parties, for example, there was a bit of enthusiasm about the basic idea, but not about the actual, let's say, legislative role that this assembly could play, or like the actual power it would have. And so we decided to run for elections ourselves, because that would allow us to have the political sort of weight in parliament to propose whatever comes out of such an assembly, but also the financial and human means to, like, the resources really to organize these assemblies ourselves. And so this was sort of the idea of being a Trojan horse inside parliament, changing the system from within by showing that it actually works, and that these sort of assemblies produce quality proposals and could actually be a very good supplement to political decision-making as it happens today. So that's sort of the idea where it like came from, like this idea of bringing this Trojan horse inside of the parliament. And where we are today is that we've organized 3 of these assemblies, and we have a bunch of staff and volunteers running both these assemblies and the actual political work that sort of comes after.
So I know you were talking about having a kind of assembly that is decided by not by elections, but kind of like being selected. So the system of sortation. And out of curiosity, I know, so you guys have the Brussels City Assembly where people are elected via sortation. And out of curiosity, how does that work? Like, how do you select people?
Well, it looks like this, sort of. Let me see if I can show you. So here are all the people on the map. I don't know if you can see the little yellow dots. These are all the people.
Okay.
Well, it's not super important, but it's all the people that have actually accepted to be part of our Citizens Assembly. Practically how it works is that a bunch of volunteers goes out and distributes manually 6,000 envelopes based on an algorithm that some volunteers developed, which sort of estimates how many people would live in a building based on density and 3D building size. And then by distributing these envelopes to sort of give everyone an equal chance to be invited, we wait for people to register. And then from the people that register, we make a random selection again, but applying quota, like criteria for gender, education level, and age, to have a diverse Citizens Assembly. And so from, at least for the first assembly, we wanted 89 people to have the same number as MPs in our parliament. So we distributed 6,000 envelopes, got about 500 registrations, out of which we selected the 89 participants for the first assembly. Just to give you an idea of the numbers.
Okay. And then I guess kind of you were talking about like the idea of trying to make it so you're representing people across the kind of spectrum of demographics. So I'm curious, what's kind of the average like profile of a Agora supporter? Like, are there a lot of young supporters? Are there a lot of old supporters? And this is also a question for everyone. I know Pepijn has been talking a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe someone else wants to take this one.
So about what we called inside Agoras, volunteers of Agora. That's it? Okay. Yeah. Maybe Marie, you can. You don't have sound.
I'm not sure. Was that the question, or was it the profile of the people randomly selected? So
it's like the profile of the party supporters, like who are the, yeah.
Okay. Well, the people I have been able to meet, the other volunteers, they are, first, they are committed to the idea of rejuvenating democracy. It's quite a big challenge for the moment in our democracies, including in Belgium. So they are committed people. They are mainly young people, creative people with a lot of enthusiasm, and very open and flexible. They are also, in my experience, educated people, but they are able to speak to a wide array of different people from different social strata. And this is remarkable, I think, because in Brussels, we have almost 200 different national groups. So it's a very cosmopolitan city. And some of the people who are selected at random come from deprived neighborhoods. Some are even illiterate. And therefore, it's for the volunteers establishing a dialogue and maintaining the commitment of such groups is quite remarkable, I would say. But then, although most of the volunteers I have worked with so far are young, and when I say young, it's Pepijn's age, so it's about 30 years old or even younger. There are also a few my age, and so I'm representing this part of Agora today.
Maybe I can add a few details about that also. Is
Sure.
it related how we work? So what do they do, these volunteers? So one thing very important in Agora is that it's not organized as a pyramid. Pepijn is not our boss. We have what we call the sociocratic organization. So there are groups of works that has got goals, and all these goals should fit together. So Pepijn and I are invested in such groups, and in these groups there are volunteers. So we might say that we have volunteers that like to think about the organization, what would be Agora's next step, how should we build the design of the assemblies, and we will have kind of volunteers that are thinking about the way that should work in details. And you have maybe another profile of volunteers that needs more action. Okay, the day one of the assembly, what should we done? How to make that everybody's got food at the right time, that everybody's in the good room at the right time. And you have all these logistics that is important as well. You have also, like Pepijn says, people that delivering letters, and so volunteers that only appears when there are such logistic needs. And then, yeah, that's maybe people. And so to speak about these groups, we have the parliament groups, how to deliver as literal as possible the proposals of the assembly. And there is a group that have maybe the juridic skills. There are people in the assemblies, like Marie says, how to be inclusive, how to make deliberation works that people with less level of education or maybe recently coming in Belgium, they feel, how to make that they feel that they've got an equal place in the discussion. And so there are people that would have facilitation skills. And so on. You have also a communication aspect, and as I said, external relation skills, which sometimes means a diplomatic conversation with other movements, but it's also to maybe create little animations, little workshops with youth or with other kind of association to make discover our perspective and what's the point of that. What's the point of renewal democracy in such way? I said.
So I guess you guys have been talking a lot about how like there are, I know, like looking at your website, looking at the manifesto, you guys talked about how representative democracy in Belgium just kind of isn't really working. And Pepijn mentioned earlier about how potentially one day making it so only the Brussels Citizen Assembly, which is elected by sortation, is like the only legislative body. So I guess my big question is like, what are the problems with representative democracy, and specifically representative democracy in Belgium?
Well, being in such a system on a daily basis, I'd say there's like the general idea behind it I don't really like the fact that you just designate someone that can make any kind of decision for you in 5 years time and you don't have any say on that. Like you can write them letters but no one does, or you can try to interact with them but no one does. But apart from that, I think specifically in Belgium, or at least as opposed to the American system, for example, or well, whatever. I think political parties have a lot of power, which means that not only do you vote for someone that is supposed to represent you, but what the person actually is going to do or say does not depend on the person, but depends on their party president. And so you have these, all of that sort of amounts to a parliament having little power and a government having a lot of power in Belgium. And you see that in parliament, like what people do and say, it's just like, it's theater and it's communication attempts. It's, for example, recently we've had this discussion about one of the texts that the Brussels Citizens Assembly has scrutinized. It was about access to free periodic protection material for young women. So like tampons and cups and these kind of things. And it was from from the left, like rather extreme left-wing party in Belgium, the PTB. And even like, so there was a resolution asking that the government put this in place, and the government is putting this in place. And so I announced that I would be for this idea because that's what the Citizens Assembly said, like, hey, this is a good idea, let's do this. And then the discussion that sort of ensues is all theater to say that it's not the right wording and not the right framing and blah, 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 blah. But I get a call from like the secretary of the Green Party, which is like the second biggest party in the Brussels government. And they especially are actually for this idea. So they called me and they said like, hey, we saw that you sent a bunch of amendments to make a few detailed changes to the text. But you know, we can never accept this text because it comes from the opposition and because the government is already working on it a little bit. And if they would have this text passed, they would sort of claim whatever we are already doing, even if it's not enough, but whatever we are already doing or will do in the future, they will claim it as their victory. And so all of these sort of petty thoughts are constantly at play in a parliament because of this mechanism of political parties wanting to profile themselves and always having the next elections in mind. So it's just ridiculous because like I have this call with this person, she says, I find it ridiculous as well. And we would like to vote for it, but in this current system, we cannot, because then the other party that is in opposition would just make it a big win for them and therefore discredit us or credit themselves or something like that, which is, it's not at all about the basic idea of, okay, you have this assembly, you bring people together, they represent different layers of society, and together they find solutions for society's problems. That's not at all how it works. So even if the idea might be interesting, although I think the 5-year period, which you have no control on what people actually do, is too long. Even if that idea might be interesting, it doesn't work like that in practice. It's just because of these political parties, mainly, I think, in Belgium. Yeah,
Politicians
I'll stop my rant here.
Politicians are playing too much politics is kind of the main overarching thesis.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
If I may, I would like to add 2 things. Some people feel just excluded from society because they are in inequality has increased in society, and parts of the population feel they are not part of this game any longer. So they don't feel there is something for them in representative democracy. And the other thing is that Belgium is a federal state, but it's very complex and people get lost. They have municipalities, they have provinces in some parts of the countries, not in Brussels, but in some parts of the countries, they have provincial authorities. Then we have regional level, and then we have the federal state, and then we have the European level. And there are elections, but nobody has a clear view of who is responsible for what. We have a low level of accountability culture in Belgium. Evaluation of policies in general is weak, and learning lessons from what has been tested and implemented is weak. So people think, well, it doesn't make a difference anyway, because they don't get enough information on the results. We have some good professional press, though. The balance between judiciary, legislative, and executive, as Pepijn has explained, there is too much weight on the side of the government compared with parliament and the judiciary. So it makes it difficult for people to feel they are represented, and political parties indeed impose very heavy discipline on their MPs, with a prominent role played by the presidents, the people who chair the parties.
If you don't mind that I still had a few reasons, and then we will have a lot, but maybe some of things I would say would partly cover what Pepijn says or Marie. I would say one, maybe like a little bit like slogans. You say that in US?
Slogans, yeah.
Yeah, okay. With election, we got a one-day democracy. And with what we propose, it's a way to build a continued democracy, which seem very much needed between the gap that we feel between citizen and elected persons. Another big thing, and I think it's an awful example happened in US recently, is the difference between deliberation and debating. In our citizens' assembly, we have all a system of facilitation that makes that people co-construct ideas. We take the diversity of opinions as a wealth, and we try to make this together. Like Pepijn says in the parliament, it's very difficult when parties are in the majority or in the opposition. They don't build together. They can't build together because they think the next election. And such logic of debate also seems more and more to cleave, to create walls between parts of population, and it seems to be more and more dangerous, and we are almost not talking about the same reality, and that's something very frightening. And if we have the feeling that inside assemblies people try to build general interest and understand each other, we have many at the end of assemblies, many people that are moved by what happened and says we talk with people we never have met in our life, and that's something very personally positive in their experience. A third thing is that the decisions that assemblies propose seems very more grounded. We have pandemic recently, and one of the searchers, very important in that as an expert used by the government, says the measure we take were made by a political class or a scientific class that doesn't know how the people live, all the situation in the city. And it would have been very useful that such an assembly gives some precision about what are the good measures to take when you live in a building. because many people that are deciding have not all of them probably, but mainly our biggest apartment or have a garden, and that's not really the same life when you the same life when you have a confinement. And last thing, and I would compare a little bit two problems of representative democracy. In Belgium, Marie says it very well, our system is very complex. What is good in that is that maybe a little party start to exist and we make complex majorities, but mainly, so that's a good thing for us, but it's completely impossible to understand for people. It's very long to understand, but what is the link between my vote and the majority is very difficult to make. So that's a big problem. But the majority system that exists in France or United States puts another problem. It's finally a very small part of the population is represented. So represent a way or another seems a dead hand for some aspects of some important issues of democracy. We don't want to replace it at all completely, but it must be very well completed. And I said, thank you.
So right now, you guys are just operating in Brussels, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans to expand out across the country, or right now is kind of your focus mainly on Brussels?
Action research is grounded in Brussels, but we network with, there's a wealth of experience of that kind in Belgium and in Europe in general, and even in the world, as we are in contact with you today. There is interest in such approaches. So Mike has said, at the same time as we are experimenting in and improving constantly in Brussels, we are also networking horizontally and across Europe with people who have questions, who would like to experiment at different level and to develop common tools. We are trying to pool resources so that we can have a bigger weight. So that would be my reply.
So you guys have talked a couple times about how, you know, a lot of the political parties are kind of hostile towards you guys. But you did say that, like, when you brought up the idea of like greater citizen participation within politics, like the Green parties were kind of supportive of that. And you talked about how like the Green parties were also backing you with the tampon measures going on in Brussels. So I guess if I'm a voter in Brussels, like the Green parties are, they're not as established as like the Christian Democrats or the Liberals or the Socialists, but they're a more established party. So I guess if I want more representation for citizens, why should I vote for Agora and not the Greens?
One start.
Well, maybe just as like for context, the Christian Democrats, they're annihilated in Belgium. They're like not there anymore. They changed names.
The French ones,
yeah.
Yeah.
The Dutch-speaking ones as well. They have a minister in Flanders that's fucking up so badly that he actually should resign, but they just have no one else that could be minister that could actually do the job, so they leave him in position. So that's just a side note. Why? And this is interesting because this was a discussion we had a lot during the campaign. Why would people vote for us and not for instead for the Green Party? Well, because our only point is we need to change our governance system, and so the Green Party says, okay, we need to do our governance, we need to make some tweaks to our governance system, but also we need to eat less animals. We need to I don't know, ban cars from our cities. We need to like they have a bunch of other ideas also about education, for example, or other that sort of could collide with the ideas of a more deliberative participatory democracy. And this was tricky because we actually had a lot of other similar citizens initiatives all around Belgium during the campaign period that wanted to group with us and wanted to maybe join forces. And we're like, okay, fine, as long as the only point is we want our democracy to be more inclusive, deliberative, and participatory. But then they started discussing on what they wanted for fiscal reforms and what kind of education they want and what their economic policy would be. And for us, it was very, very quickly, very clear, like, no. We do not feel at all legitimized to make any proposal whatsoever on any policy level or on any topic, because that's exactly what we want the normal residents of Brussels to do. We want them to decide what our city looks like. And as Marie said, within Agora, we're mostly young people. We're mostly people with a university degree background, for example. So we're a certain group of population. And this is also what you see generally in politics. You don't have all layers of population. You might have people thinking that they represent all layers of population, but you have, for example, in the Brussels Regional Parliament, maybe you have 50-50 men, women, but you have 90% of people has a university degree. In Brussels, it's 30%. Another 30% in Brussels does not even have their secondary degree. So like they didn't even finish high school. Of that, I think there's no one in parliament. So it's not directly answering to your question, but the point being that the Green Party still thinks of themselves as a legitimate group of defending what the people actually want, and then also wanting to complement their own legitimacy with participation. Whereas for us, we do not consider ourselves as legitimate to make any decision, but we want it all to be made by normal people. I think that's the main difference.
Vas-y, Marie.
But the question is quite interesting, I think, because this is one of the things I have asked myself. Is it possible to rally massive support around the process, like deliberative democracy, rather than around a program to change society? Can you get elected, people elected on a proposal where you limit yourself to improving democracy? Or do you need to put forward proposals to improve the school system, the health system? It's a question that I, as a volunteer, and because I keep my freedom of thought within Agora, I still have open at my level. I was a member of the Green Party at some point in my life, and I couldn't cope with the discipline imposed by the party. So that's why I left it, because I didn't feel comfortable with the way it operated. Supposedly very open, very democratic, but at some point very, giving much direction to what you should defend and promote.
I was kind of concerned that like the Green Party is imposing on its members too much, like what they should believe.
And it came little by little. Historically, they were more horizontal, and finally, to become this now really regularly governing party, they take this path. I would say, to try to answer your question and to, in a way, answer to the question before in the same time, I think, but I'm the more young in Agora, the moment I enter in, I'm not the more young. I think we don't know yet if we are going to present ourselves at other levels. And the reason is, and it's the same why vote for us, is it the best thing to do for our goals? Because not our goal is not to remain an eternal big party or to become a party. Our goal is to implement such a kind of other democracy, and that our assemblies become institutionalized and work completely without us. And so I would say what's the difference between voting for the Green parties? For the moment, it seems that they're quite happy with recommendation that are done in such assemblies. And we want, as you understand before, we want to give a real political power that would complete the one of the elected persons. And so I think for the moment, we are the more authentic political offer on that goal. We are the one that wants to go to take this challenge the more seriously. And so maybe they will change, maybe Green or other parties will change, and maybe it will be the time for us to become a think tank more than a party. But that would be an option.
So I know there's like 20 minutes before I know Pippin has to catch a train, so I'll kind of start wrapping it up soon. So two last questions. First question, are there any like controversies or big like problems within the party, either if it's like internal problems within the party or if it's like external factors that make it difficult for the party to operate? And I think you kind of have touched up on a little bit of it, but just out of curiosity.
Well, if I would have to answer this question from my point of view, is that as an organization, because we don't like to call ourselves a party because we're not organized as a party, and the entire particratic system is something we try to sort of change. Anyway, as an organization, we are not a party, and so we don't have the resources that all the other parties have, nor the experience. And so it's very difficult to actually function within this parliamentary system because you need to write bills, you need to sort of like critically examine whatever the government decides. So they bring you like these stacks of papers. Like this is the budget of the Brussels capital region. So they drop this on your desk like after you're a few months in and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? So it's a very high threshold environment or something. It's like it's not very accessible.
Difficult to entry.
Yes, and that also, although the fact that part of the trouble we have with that is an internal choice that we made back when we just got in parliament to dedicate most of our human and also financial resources to the organization of the Citizens' Assembly, which makes sense because first we needed this assembly to run before we could defend their proposals in parliament, right? But then we realized like, okay, well, actually, we also need people that can work on that. And we had lots of trouble finding people. And we also didn't really liberate a lot of resources in terms of jobs, for example, to really further the more classical political work. So for me, because also that's my main role, and I don't have a legal background, so I don't know necessarily how to write a bill. I'm learning on the go, but it's tricky. For me, that's one of the things that we are struggling with as a party is how do you work within a parliament, like to get the actual work done, but also the subtleties involved in it. Like, okay, what's a good strategy? Do you just write the bill and you put it on the table and you ask everyone to vote on it and they dismiss it? Or is it more interesting to go and speak to all the other different MPs and try to convince them? Or should you do maybe something else entirely? Or should you work with the opposition? Or should you try to push the government to take action? And if so, how? Like all of these things, we just don't know how to do them. We're trying to figure them out on the go, but we don't have much resources allocated to that. So for me, at least, I feel it's really a daily struggle, which can be very unmotivating for like from a personal perspective.
And yet these people, believe me, Ryan, are very creative. And they can think of new ways of doing things. I have worked for part of my life as a civil servant, and I can tell you that there is much innovation in Agora. From my personal perspective, I can feel a tension in Agora between their wish to be run and operate as horizontally as possible, keeping everybody involved, asking everybody what they think about different things, but at the same time, they want to be efficient. And so trying to reconcile efficiency with internal democracy, I have felt that this is a constant challenge in Agora. But in my view, I have found them to be extremely successful so far. And that's why I remain committed as a volunteer.
Yeah, to conclude this part, and it's just a little compliment because it goes exactly in the same way. There is kind of, all the tension are about the how. So inside an assembly, for example, one of the how, but it's the same idea, the fear being efficient. We don't want to become a traditional party. So that's but we still want to be efficient to have any results. So there is a tension around inside the assembly. One thing is, I told you before that the Belgium system is very complex. And so when we explain this system to the citizen, one choice has been made to say we need them to understand for that their proposal as a chance to be formulated a way it goes somewhere. We can deliver to the parliament. The parliament would be able to do it. But doing that is finally make the imagination of citizen prisoner of the Belgium structural labyrinth of institutions. And so for the moment we do that, we're not partly happy about that, but we have not another solution that would be efficient. But we are not happy with the fact that we respect the very complex and not very meaningful boundaries of the Belgian system. So that's something we talk about every month. Huh?
So
And
finally, oh, sorry, were you saying something?
Sorry, and maybe also about the inclusion. We says further that many of the volunteers are educated. What can we do to make Agora as representative as the assembly? But people come by choice only, so it's not that easy. But we're working on that too, and we're not happy with that too. Sorry.
No, all good, all good. So finally, one last question, and Pepijn, I know you have to catch a train, so if you have to go, that's totally fine. I also will thank you again at the end, but I just want to say thank you to all of you for agreeing to do this. I appreciate it. So finally, one last question. Is there anything else that we kind of haven't touched on that you think it's important for me or my viewers to know about Agora or Belgian politics or just anything?
I think one thing we haven't touched upon yet is the fact that deliberative democracy is sort of catching on in Belgium. I think we're at the forefront in a way of this, what the OECD calls the deliberative wave in policy. And I'm not sure if it's because of our absurdly complex institutions that make it sort of like, okay, whatever, we as politicians don't have anything to say anyhow because everything's dependent on other levels, so we might as well ask the citizens because what does it change? I have no idea. Maybe this is sort of the cynical viewpoint of that. But I do also think that Agora helped this this sort of catching on. In the like German-speaking part of Belgium, a new system was put in place before the elections that got us into office, but the Brussels Regional Parliament adopted legislation where you have mixed committees, so where you have like a parliamentary committee with 15 MPs, complemented with 45 randomly selected citizens that can discuss a topic and that can write out recommendations that then 6 months later are being scrutinized by the same panel to see if something happened. I don't think it's great, but I think it's definitely a big step forward to what we had before, which was nothing in terms of deliberative democracy. So I think even if we're like a small little group of people that try to change something, and we're far from our end goal of a permanent citizens senate that has actual say on policy, baby steps are being taken. And I think we help in those baby steps being taken.
There's still an
At the
impact
same
being
time,
had.
yeah. And we just need to be careful that we don't sort of content ourselves with these little improvements. And we also need to carefully assess and watch and guarantee the quality of these processes, I think, so that people don't dismiss the entire idea of deliberative democracy as a bad idea because there's one bad process somewhere in some institution or something. Yeah, that's something I don't think we have touched upon, so which I wanted to add.
To say it shortly, I think when Agora is born, probably the main issue is making this idea known. Give a chance that would you see it could be like that, it could work. And now it seems that these model of assembly are considered at high level of governments in Belgium, in many countries of Europe. And the question is now, how serious will that be done? And will the bad ways to do it will kill the ideas? And one example, very important, I don't know if you know it, there was a convention in France about climate, and the method was very good. NGOs that watch it says it was very good and is very well documented, you can check. But the president has announced that he will implement almost all of it. And at the end, he finally makes something like, how do you say that? Shopping? Pick the one you like.
Cherry picking is what often is used.
And that ways of using it might discredit the idea. So that's something we have to be very vigilant about.
One thing that I would like to bring up is citizens' expectations regarding policy making. Because when we poll people in Belgium, we don't have everybody keen to contribute to policy making. Some people want to be able to delegate and enjoy other things in life and not bother about policy making because they think it's a job of the people they have elected. There is a lack, in my view, of civic education in Belgium. In our schools, we don't have much attention paid to what I experienced when I was in the United States, that engaging for your school is something that is valued by the teaching staff and by education in general. So we have a paucity of experience targeting young people to get them involved, interested and involved in policy making. And as long as this stays this way and people are not prepared, it's very difficult to change this once they reach adulthood, in my view. So I would pay much attention to the educational system.
All right. Well, I think that will end it unless there's anything else anyone wants to say. I would like to thank all three of you for coming out and talking with me. I really appreciate it. I will end the recording now.